First-century Judea was a powder keg of theological expectation. The Jesus movement originated as a localized expression of Jewish Messianic expectation, firmly within the boundaries of first-century Judean life. Their primary objective was firmly rooted in ancient Judaism, achieving covenantal renewal and securing the promised restoration of Israel. They argued that the long-standing promises made to the Jewish people were actively being realized through one specific person. The threat this movement posed to the establishment came directly from their assertion that they possessed the true, authorized fulfillment of the existing covenant. Enter Saul of Tarsus. He was an elite scholar, a rigorous Pharisee with a deep academic mastery of Mosaic Law. Yet despite his sophisticated theological training, his immediate response to the early Christians was systematic violence. Saul's actions were the disciplined output of his elite training, a sophisticated theological architecture that guided every blow he struck. His actions were highly calculated and internally consistent, following a logic derived from the very law he spent his life studying. To understand him, we must view his persecution as a Levitical guilt offering, a legally prescribed mechanism designed to avert divine wrath caused by the movement's impurity. For Saul, hunting down early Christians was a required act of theological preservation. He was acting to protect the covenant. The prevailing framework of the time is best described by historians like E.P. Sanders as covenantal nomism. This is the belief that strict obedience to the law is the required mechanism keeping Israel's relationship with God intact. Looking directly at the Hebrew text of the Torah, strict adherence to its purity laws is not presented as an optional guideline. The physical temple in Jerusalem served as the exclusive, divinely ordained space for encountering God. It was the spatial center of this theology. Within those walls, prescribed rituals and animal sacrifices provided the exact mechanical means required to atone for sin. This creates a closed-loop system. As obedience flows inward to the temple, holiness and purity flow outward to the nation. Maintaining this structural purity was viewed as the strict prerequisite before God would grant the ultimate restoration of Israel. The stakes were existential. Any unatoned impurity accumulating within the camp invited immediate divine judgment upon the entire community. Within the framework of covenantal nomism, an unauthorized pathway to God creates a severe structural threat to the physical survival of the nation. The Jesus movement disrupted this exact framework by claiming that the long-awaited restoration of Israel was already underway. They achieved this fulfillment by entirely bypassing the physical temple and its rigid system of ancient prescribed rituals. Early Christians redefined the spatial center of their faith. They positioned Jesus himself as both the ultimate living temple and the final sacrifice. This rerouted the entire flow of purity. Atonement and covenantal renewal now emanated directly from this new, decentralized Messiah node. This new methodology relied on grace, faith, and the Spirit, discarding the need for strict physical adherence to the Torah. For Pharisaic scholars, this bypass was highly offensive. It rendered the meticulously maintained, divinely ordained Levitical pathways obsolete. By proclaiming a new form of righteousness, the Jesus movement directly attacked the established architecture of Israel's covenant, triggering a massive theological immune response. Saul looked at the Jesus movement's claims and made a precise theological diagnosis. He categorized their grace-based bypass as a dangerous accumulation of systemic impurity. The Book of Leviticus prescribes a guilt offering, a legal countermeasure required to expiate systemic sin before it breaks the covenant. Saul's targeted persecution was a direct, violent application of this law. He deployed extreme force to counteract the weight of the movement's impurity. This force was intended to appease God and immediately arrest the impending divine judgment. Saul weaponized the law in order to save the law. His persecution was a desperately calculated act meant to restore the strict balance of his universe. The sudden, blinding encounter on the road to Damascus forced a complete, radical structural inversion in Saul's theology. Crucially, his foundational goal remained exactly the same. He still sought the ultimate restoration of Israel and covenantal purity. What changed was the mechanism. He realized the Jesus movement was the actual culmination of the covenant. He replaced the load-bearing pillar of the physical temple with faith in Christ. This radically expanded the covenant to both Jews and Gentiles. Saul the persecutor became Paul the apostle, strictly because his understanding of how God fulfills his promises was radically inverted. Post-Damascus, Paul recognized that his previous violent guilt offerings were entirely obsolete under the new Messianic reality. The early emergence of Christianity was a profound clash over the definition of covenantal space. The collision between these sophisticated theological architectures propelled the movement forward, carrying more weight than any historical accident or impulsive zealotry. Paul applied that same rigorous logic to his legacy of mass evangelism, spreading this new architectural framework across the Mediterranean. Understanding the intense Levitical logic behind Saul's violence provides the clearest lens to grasp the magnitude of the theological revolution that ultimately emerged from it.